Abhijit Minhas here, your host for the Thinking Physio podcast. This is episode maybe 8, maybe 9, I can't remember. But we kind of slowly adding to our podcast roster there, getting some guests and adding those numbers. So I'm pretty excited. This one happened on the fly. We didn't prepare a lot for it, and I have some really exciting guests on this time. I have a repeat guest from our last podcast. If you heard Gaurav Sharma was here for the last one and the one before. Sorry, I don't remember the numbers, but it was a really interesting conversation. If you haven't heard that and you want to get a little bit of background about that, go back to our previous ones. The links are on SoundCloud, on my Facebook page, and I can share that again. So Gaurav is one of the guests, and we have another guest today with us, and that's Manav. Manav is Gaurav. Gaurav introduced us to us, and this podcast is morphing. It's changing into something which I initially had not planned. So the reason I say that is because Manav is not a physiotherapist. He's not in the field. He's not in the medical field. So you might wonder, what can we get out of this? Plenty, actually, I'd say. We were having a bit chat with Manav before, almost a good half an hour chat, man, and I'm really pumped up for this podcast. So it's going to be really amazing. And the reason I brought him on is just because, I was talking about introducing Gaurav first, Manav likes to get after it. That's how I like to put it. He likes to get after it and he gets things done. And I think they are training partners and they're working out, and it's just a whole lot of motivation. And the other thing the reason I wanted to invite Manav also was because Manav he's getting after it, he's putting his body through all these things, the miles, and his perspective on injuries and training and him being a patient. So that's going to be a first on this podcast. We're going to have somebody who's actually been as a patient and gone to physios, and I want to hear his experience of what he thinks he's wanting out of his physio sessions. So I think for a lot of us physios who are sitting here, this is really crucial because we need to understand the mindset of what our patients are looking for. Not everybody's like a 50-year-old who's coming to do some TheraBand exercises, right? So sometimes we need to switch things up a little bit. Anyways, so without further ado, gents, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Abhijit.
Thanks, Abhijit.
Yeah, I'm going to be more like a co-host in this show than answering questions.
Oh wow, that's amazing. Well, I got to point out, this is my first podcast where I've had guests with sheets of paper and notes. So guys, our guests come prepared, So and that's one of the reasons why they're here. So that's interesting, but it's going to be really fun.
I hope the papers go away with time.
we do have a few drinks around here, not Manav though, but I don't know if you replace those papers with drinks, but yeah, let's see how this goes.
Yeah.
So
it's not going to be scripted for sure.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. All right, so let's go back and let's first start with you, Gaurav. So people know a bit about Gaurav, but just tell us a little bit about your background, where are you from, what did you study, and stuff like that. We discussed about it, but for our listeners who don't know, can you just give
Thanks Abhijit, and hi Gaurav, and hello to everybody who's listening in. Thanks for listening in. So this is me, Manav, a regular guy. I don't think something you will find here which is extremely out of the ordinary. Yeah, I think starting off with India, born and brought up in North India, hail from Punjab, Chandigarh, and started off with the initial part of my career also across, various states in the country, and recently moved to Canada, 2016 initially, but then again, towards the end of 2019. But so I'm a management professional, actually work with Philips, now called Signify. And I think that what I would, if there's one point that I would leave behind in your minds around me, is look at me as a passionate guy who has a love for sport. That's how I would introduce myself. And yes, physio has been a very integral part of the effort. I think the role that physio has had in my life so far is to keep the blade sharp. It's a very supporting role, and I don't think I would have got to do what I have, a little bit of whatever it is worth, without the support of friends like you.
Awesome! Wow, yeah, that's being a little humble though.
Yeah, that's being very honest. To to tell the listeners just a little bit of what he does and what he has achieved, accomplished so far. He is an ultra marathoner.
Ultra runner, yeah.
Ultra marathon runner, which means 50 kilometers, which is more than a marathon. So he has done several of those. He has also done a full marathon in under 3 hours 15 minutes, which is the elite, elite of the elite's time. So he's qualified for Boston, qualified for New York, for Berlin. So in all these three races that I mentioned, you need to qualify. You cannot just go and register. So you have to be a top level athlete to qualify, to be able to qualify to these races. So that's the kind of person that we're talking to.
That's interesting. So you said you qualified for them, but did you then actually go ahead and participate in them, or?
Very good question. The qualification happened last October, and then COVID spoiled stuff. So if you go by the Boston Athletic Association announcement that comes out of Boston again, they have made a special provision because 2020 races got cancelled. So 2021 is when they're giving people like me a chance, who couldn't make it the last time, to get an automatic entry. And well, as Gaurav said it, the Boston Marathon is supposed to be the holy grail of all marathons. It is the oldest in the world and the most prestigious.
Oh, my limited knowledge on marathons, and being from New York for so many years, I thought New York was the big one. But Boston?
New York is a big one. Boston is Berlin, Boston, London, marathons.
Yeah. So it's called the six majors.
Okay.
And the six majors include Boston, London, New York, Tokyo, Paris, and Berlin.
Okay.
These are the ones that are considered to be the world majors.
And within these, is it considered within the running community that one is more difficult than the other, or some are really difficult, or are they quite similar? Not the distance wise, but the way, the terrain and where you're running and stuff like that.
Very interesting. Not that I've done most of these, but of course distance is identical.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is 26.2 miles. But yes, the terrain can be different. So Berlin is supposed to be the fastest. So the world records on the marathon circuit are broken in Berlin.
Oh, really?
New York is supposed to be tough.
Okay.
Because Brooklyn Bridge, and towards the end, it gets very windy. Boston is famous for something called Heartbreak Hill. So you have a fantastic, good 20 miles, and in the last 6 miles, you're 6 miles short of your finish, and you hit a 2-kilometer hill, and that's supposed to break people's morale down, and they kind of hit the wall, as they say, and they lose it there. So it's Heartbreak Hill. So every race is very different. It's a very different experience.
Okay, but would you say this would be the toughest, or even out of these big six, are there some which are considered really difficult marathons around the world?
I think all of them are different and respected in their own right, and that is why we say that there are 6 world majors, and it is not the number one race in the world. So all of them are considered equal. Okay. In fact, people who do the world 6 majors get a medal, which is actually a combination of 6 medals together. And that's one of those things where runners would die for.
Wow.
Yeah, I won't be surprised if you get that combination medal in 3 or 4 years.
Amen. Not there yet, but would love to be.
What would you go? Are you also planning? Would that be one of the mentioned goals?
I'm not that level, but my first goal is to be able to do a full marathon in under 4 hours 30 minutes, okay. And then I'll go from there.
I see. And you said how much is the qualifying for? Do all of them have similar qualifying times?
Very good question. Actually, so what you must understand about most marathon organizing and organizations, they're charity events.
Okay.
Now, how does charity happen? Charity happens when, or two things. One is sponsorship, which is major, and second is subscription. So when you buy tickets to a marathon. Now, races like New York, like Berlin, like London, the qualifying times are actually very steep, and most non-elite professionals are unable to qualify. That is because only 10% or 15% of the seats are left in the open quota, correct? And those are filled by the elites, elites from Europe, from the US. There is a whole different level of athletic participation from Africa these days.
Sorry to interject. What do you mean open quota?
So you have a timing certificate which is recognized by the Global Athletic Association,
Okay.
and based on that timing you share the score at the time when you apply for the registration, and you have to meet a cutoff.
Okay.
Those cutoffs are very steep. So actually for New York it is under 3 hours.
Oh.
You know, you have to be faster than a 3 hour run to get to New York. Berlin will be even faster. So most people, and even people like me, in fact people who are much faster than me, they buy their tickets, they buy their participation in all races except for Boston.
Oh.
So Boston is the race that is considered to be, as I said, the holy grail of all marathons. They allow amateur athletes to participate in large numbers. So that is where they come with an age and gender cutoff across a whole set of people starting from 18 right up to 70 years of age, with different timings for men and women, and you have to qualify that to get into Boston. So for all other races, for all other world majors, you basically buy your membership, which is essentially a charity contribution. But for Boston, there is hardly any charity. There is no charity actually. Very little. There is, but very little.
Okay.
You proper athletes choose to qualify. So that's what I've done. For
Understood.
Boston, I qualified for a world major.
Oh wow. Okay. So that now we know why it's the holy grail. And like, is it expensive to buy into like one of the races? Is it a couple of $100?
Fairly expensive.
Okay.
So I remember, I haven't checked the prices in dollar terms, but I can quickly calculate. It'll cost you upwards of $2,500 to get to any of the world major races minimum. You know.
I see.
But if you're qualifying in Boston, it's not like that.
I see.
You know.
Okay.
So hotels, and it's like that. The association of say Berlin Marathon will release a certain amount of athletic tickets to a company which sells it as a ticket and a hotel and a flight. You know,
Understood.
and that's how the money is raised, and part of it goes to charity.
Okay. And I know you said like you've done like a few like he's told me you've done we actually spoke about 50 kilometers. We haven't gotten to that. We just talk about regular marathons right now. What about like I'm sure you've run a bunch of marathons in India, right? And any other places that you've run like
Yeah.
in Canada?
So I think the last one that I qualified Boston on was actually, it was supposed to be Toronto,
Okay.
but I had work spoiling my party.
Okay.
So I preponed my race and I ran Cumberland, which is just outside Ottawa.
Okay.
It was actually a cold day, a hilly race, not the optimal race that you want to do if you want to qualify for Boston. But I had no choice, so I gave it everything I had, and it worked well. So that's one. The other one that I did last year was Amsterdam. Beautiful race. You know, you run around the city, you run around the museum, you run around the river. You know, so Amsterdam is another. And then, these are the two that I've done outside, and then balance. You know, I've always been doing Bombay, Hyderabad, Bangalore, Delhi, of course, half marathons every time, and so on and so forth. That's on my full marathons, actually 2 outside the country.
Okay.
Now I'm looking forward to doing one here.
Interesting. Now so there are two things I want to ask you. First of all, what do you guys consider as to be ideal marathon running conditions?
Flat and downhill.
Is that true though? Like, what if it's downhill? That requires, I would think, eccentric control, and you could get sore after that, right?
A lot of people to qualify for Boston Marathon, they choose to do downhill running just to qualify, just to be able to experience the feeling of doing the Boston Marathon. And you do that in Quebec.
So you mean like when you're trying to run these qualifying races,
Yeah.
is there somebody like, of course you're doing it another marathon, but there you could kind of choose, oh, this might be downhill, so I might make more like less time and
Yeah.
Oh, so you need to go to the internet and look at the racing community, and you say best race for BQ qualification. So BQ, so
Yeah.
Boston qualification.
okay.
And you'll find a list of races, depends on where you are.
Yeah.
So it is true. But you're right, ideal conditions for running, I think it's the same as the ideal conditions for running. Running a marathon is just running.
Yeah.
Temperature under 15 degree,
Okay.
relatively flat, rolling hills are fine. and you just, well, access to plenty of water and food on the way.
Less humidity and less sun.
Yeah.
Okay. But like, have you been like, what about like the ones in India? So that was my second question. First of all, like me and Gaurav have been kind of out of the country for a little while now, but you were kind of current with what was going on there. Where did this marathon culture start from? Like, well, I can at least say 15 years ago, you could say everybody was running a marathon, but now it seems like it's coming more in the spotlight. It could either be that I didn't know about it, or I just see it more now, or it's actually that it wasn't that big of a deal, and now you see like a lot of emphasis because we see injuries related to that. So.
That's true. And you nailed it right. In fact, I've been running in India since 2012, and I would say that the volume of the number of people has exponentially increased in the last, I would say, 7-8 years actually, around that time. People actually started hitting the road and doing runs. But if you compare India's marathons, and the biggest marathon in India is actually Standard Chartered Mumbai Marathon. It's no longer Standard Chartered, it's called the Tata Mumbai Marathon now.
Even New York, right?
Yeah, same. You know, the TCS, the Tata run. It's now it's the biggest marathon in India. The participation of that run is nowhere close to what you see in the big 5 and the big 6. I mean, here, it's still half or maybe a third actually. 20,000 people run in Bombay the full marathon, whereas you're looking at upwards of 55,000 running Amsterdam. I'm not even talking about London. You know, 55,000 people run Chicago. You know, and these are not the major running events in the world. So, but yes, the growth is definitely there. There are a lot more people running. And it starts like that. You start with a 5K race and a 10K race, and then go to half marathon, and then the marathon is what you end up doing. But it's growing very fast.
So who do you attribute it to, Milind Soman or?
Oh, very interesting. So I share my running history with Milind Soman.
Oh, really? Wow.
Around the time when he started training is the time when we were actually doing well, you know, and he actually notched up his training with a friend of mine in Gurgaon called Abhishek, you know, a guy who I know very well.
Okay.
So
Same guy who did the Ironman?
yeah, the Ironman. So in fact, I very well remember like yesterday that Milind and Abhishek are going to their first Ironman. I forget where they went to do it. They were it together actually.
Florida?
So, but I don't remember now. I thought it was somewhere in Europe.
Yeah.
It was in Europe, I think. But Milind Soman has a very different level of audience, man. He's a celebrity.
Yeah.
You know, so when a celebrity does a marathon, you know, it's a big thing.
Yeah.
And professional guys like us are not that, you know, well recognized.
Well, I feel like with you, like people who might be around you and who are runners, like they definitely get motivated seeing other people. But Milind Soman, like you said, is a public figure, right? Like. So a lot of people, and the other thing I find is just this whole concept of seeing him do barefoot and everybody's doing barefoot. So, well, we'll get to that in a second. But do you think like would that was Milind Soman part of like why it got famous, and or were there like other major factors that I don't know about?
So let me be fair. I think the impact that Milind Soman has created, I should say, I shouldn't even say can, he has created in making running popular is absolutely of a very high order as compared to what runners do. Because as I said, for me, running is a sport, right? So I'm interested in doing my thing. I'm not interested in moving the whole city behind me. You know, but that's frankly what a performance runner is all about. You know, they're sharpening the edge. But people like Milind Soman, they have become ambassadors of running. So if you have followed him a little, you will see that he's the Pinkathon ambassador, and the Pinkathon ambassador is a women-focused initiative, bringing women into fitness and running, which is very noble. So at a level, it is not important how good a runner Milind is, but it's about mobilization of the community, and he's done a phenomenal job at that. In fact, I train with a coach who's the best in the country and arguably one of the best guys in the world. But what the number of people that Milind can move is of a very high order as compared to what our coach does.
Oh yeah.
So that's the difference. The space is large. We all are playing different roles.
Right. I see. How about you, Gaurav? Have you done any marathons in India?
No, I have not.
Okay. Are you looking
I
forward to?
registered for the Delhi half marathon, but it got cancelled.
Oh, half marathon. Okay.
Yeah.
What was the reason?
I was in India at that time, and then it actually got cancelled because of the election.
Must be pollution. Oh, elections.
Elections.
Okay. Yeah. Off late it gets cancelled because of pollution.
Yeah.
That's funny. So now, like in India, what time do you run in? Like, what is the time for marathons in India? I'm sure it's not like in the peak.
Pre-dawn.
Pre-dawn. Okay.
We start off at 4 o'clock.
Oh wow.
In
really?
summers, you start off at 3:45 and 4.
Oh, I see.
By the time it's 6 and 6:30 or 7, you're touching 36 degrees.
That's scorching. Yeah.
You know, so and if we have to do a long run, it's headlights on our we wear headlights.
Yeah.
We have reflecting lights on our shoulders, ankle lights, and everything, and we run the highways, hoping that drunk truck drivers won't maul us in.
But what about like the races and what months do they generally happen?
Winters in India.
Always.
Always winters. So we normally slog it in the summers,
Mhm.
hoping that the hard work of the summers will show up as spectacular results in the winters. The first races begin in end August. The first one is Hyderabad, always. The first race to start.
Okay.
And then September, October, November, December, all the way till Feb.
Okay. And within India, are there ones which are more difficult than others, or again pretty similar?
No, there are a lot of differences.
Okay.
Delhi is supposed to be a fast race.
Okay.
You know, two of them, the IDBI full marathon and the ATRL half, they're fast races, flat central Delhi running through Lutyens.
Okay.
You know, Hyderabad is supposed to be the toughest.
Oh really? What's
Super,
that?
oh man, elevation.
Oh okay. Yeah, it's kind of okay. I
Oh
see
yeah,
what
you
you're
keep
saying.
on going. I remember doing Hyderabad and I've done it twice.
Okay.
And they put you through 11 flowers.
Oh.
Yeah,
11
11
flowers.
flowers, yeah. it's a very tough race
It kills
and
you.
it's hot.
It kills you.
You know, so they do it in end August. It always rains that day. You know, it always rains. You know, I remember always staying living around Lumbini Park. You know, in one of those hotels, and then starting off from Necklace Road
Okay.
and going out all the way to Gachibowli. Somebody was talking about it. That's the route.
Oh,
It starts
wow.
from Necklace Road and goes all the way to Gachibowli.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's a tough route.
I remember doing 3 consecutive races on the same day, 23rd of September, 3 years. And it's unusually hot on 23rd of September.
Oh, man.
So a couple of days before and after would be like mild 10, 15 degrees. And on the race day, it'll be like 20, 25 degrees.
So it's just I know a thing or two about
It's
like
a
the
coincidence,
Hyderabad heat
yeah.
though. Yeah, I know it could be pretty scorching. Like it's just direct heat. It's
Yeah.
like there's not
Dry.
a whole lot of it's dry heat. It's not a
Dry.
whole lot of humidity there. And like, have you seen like runners get nosebleeds and stuff like that, or even you guys have you had that? Or?
That's a good point actually. To be honest, trained runners don't experience this problem.
Okay.
Trained runners will have all kinds of other problems. They'll have a plantar problem and they'll have an Achilles and.
Right.
But things like nosebleeds and all, I don't see trained runners having this. It's the new runners which
Okay.
experience these problems. And you're physios, and if you correlate the distance vis-a-vis injuries,
Yeah.
you will see that short distance races have much higher injury because you have the bravado happening much more in short distance.
Oh.
So
makes sense.
I can do a 21.
Yeah.
You know, I get up from the bed today and I decide to do a 21.
Yeah.
You know, that is what gets them in injuries rather than a guy who's doing a full marathon who very well knows what he's into
Okay, what
and is
cases?
preparing for a while.
But these bravado guys also confuse you in the beginning because when you start a run, you're almost like warming up in the initial.
And they're racing.
And they're racing. Everybody's going past you, and then you think, what's going on? Am I
That's
too
one, of the,
slow?
that's one of the biggest coaching input that we get
Yeah,
from our
that's
coach.
so never think that you are going slow initially. Just do what you're doing, and then don't compare yourself to the others.
Pacing
Because
strategy.
those who go past you initially, you will run them over in the next 5 or 10 kilometers.
Yeah, I gotta say, like for people who don't think about running or not into it, it's pretty strategic. Like there's so many other things. Like for example, take a 400-meter race, right? Like every once in a while, I'm not saying Olympic level, but if you see like local like track and field meets and stuff like that, and people who are not like, I don't want to say weekend warriors, but they're not like high level athletes. Even in a 400, you'll see once in a while somebody is like really pushing it initially, right? And then you see them just kind of run out of gas and they fall behind. And you're like, yeah, that is probably a strategy issue, you know?
It is
You
a
know,
strategy. Yeah.
Very interesting point actually. Again, this goes back and you remind me of my coach and one of his diktats. running is a skill sport. It's it's as much as a skill sport as is golf, as is cricket, as is squash. So it's not that you just lace up your shoes and go out and you become a runner. Everybody can run and everybody can swing a club,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're not going to hit a birdie unless you train for it. Similarly, you're not going to qualify a Boston Marathon. You're not going to do a marathon distance unless you train for it properly and know what it takes. So it's form, then there's distance, then there's speed, then there's nutrition, then there's clothing. It's skill. So I think, and that is where running is the most underrated. The minute you acknowledge that running is a skill sport, the outlook changes. Then you have to invest in the skill, and you know that you have to learn and read and practice, and then expect anything.
That's true. Just the methodology of training for, let's say, even a half marathon or a full marathon. Let's talk about just the half marathon. You need at least, if you are like a rudimentary basic level runner, you need at least 4 months time to be able to like a half marathon in a respectable time. So you need of course proper clothing, and then the right amount of the sheer volume of training that's required to finish a half marathon or a full marathon. It's just unbelievable. So you have to like get up every single morning with a goal.
Yeah.
And it's everything. It's a complete lifestyle change. It's nutrition.
Yeah.
Like again, you cannot be like indulging in alcohol or eating outdoors and all that stuff, and then sleep, and everything counts. Everything.
And it's interesting that you guys brought this point up because in our rehab physio world, recently there are physios who are specially trained, like who are basically, they're not specially trained, but well they are, but I think it comes from they themselves being runners, right? They understand what goes into like the whole process. They often nowadays in the rehab world are describing running as an activity where the masses think that running, you run to get fit, and then they land up in these offices, and the first advice that the physios tell them is, no, you need to be fit to run. Because,
Absolutely true.
yeah, you just can't like you said,
Absolutely
you can't put your
true.
shoes on and just start running because you'll get injured. We see this all the time, right? So that's a big mindset change, right?
Absolutely. In fact, once in a while when I will put on some weight in between training cycles, and I go outside my I would say window of running fitness, I will actually aggressively cycle and get back into that window before I resume my running volume build up the way it should be. In fact, that's how Gaurav and I got together.
Yeah.
Because I was looking for a cycling partner because I needed to shed a couple of kgs, and I did shed 10. Right? I shed 10, and this with him.
Yeah.
And then I'm back to my high volume running training.
And I shed fire.
That's both good numbers there. But like I want to ask you guys, so what's your I know you always say it's your sport, right? Like passion is equal to sport in that sense for people who don't know what we're talking about, but that's your sport. But what really is your sport? Is running your sport or cycling your sport?
Very good question. So running has been my sport. I want to take it to the next level of triathletics. So I don't want to choose cycling.
Okay.
Cycling is enjoyable in Canada. I've never enjoyed cycling as much as I have enjoyed here. I would say running and cycling is at an equal level of personal satisfaction. It never was the case in India. In India, cycling was like a risk of life every day. But here it is enjoyable. But I think it's not about moving to a particular sport. I want to graduate to triathlete. So Ironman. And the reason I believe is, one, frankly, it's a higher level of performance and sporting excellence. And second, I do believe that the minute you bring in triathletic training, the body becomes stronger and you're less prone to injury as well. I tend to get hurt when I notch up my training on running.
Okay.
So that's my logic.
So that's more cross training.
Yeah.
When you're talking about swimming, biking, and running.
So do you think that's because of just being like a multifaceted like training where you include different things as opposed to doing the same thing over and over again?
Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely. And even in running, we are supposed to do a lot of cross training and do exercise and strengthening for supporting muscles which are not directly involved in training.
So what does that look like?
Oh, it's, well, okay.
Just like
Let me be honest, not something that I have been very disciplined about, and I have paid the price.
Okay.
You know, I was in fact with Gaurav 10 days ago, and he clearly pointed out that listen, you need to strengthen your gluteus medius, right? Medialis, sorry. Medius.
Yeah.
Yes.
And probably that's not the muscle that you use so much in running because it's movement muscle for lateral movement.
Yeah.
It's a stabilizer.
Yeah.
And he's advised me to strengthen it.
Okay.
So, but if you're cross training and if you're doing all kinds of exercises, then obviously you're better off.
So what about like in cross training and preparing for running? Like what would some workouts like? Do you guys deadlift?
Yeah.
Okay. What else?
100 deadlifts this morning.
Oh, 100.
Yeah.
So what weight are you doing around there?
Not too much.
Okay.
40 pounds, not much. But
I
basically,
haven't done deadlift in a while. I used to do it in the gym. Deadlift is probably, I think, one of the most important exercise for a runner. A lot of people think that running is quad dominant activity. It is not. It's mostly glutes and hamstrings that you use, especially for long distance runners, because you cannot. Your glutes are they don't tire. Glutes don't tire. They have endless supply for energy and like endurance.
I paused it. I don't know.
Amazon again.
Yeah, okay.
Usually that's what I do.
इसको ना it's coming pretty perfect. आपका अच्छा है and I'll move this a little closer to you.
ये मेरे को
Sorry. Sorry.
ये क्या है उसमें कुछ delicate तो नहीं है?
नहीं कोई delegate नहीं।
Okay. पूजा was saying कि कुछ हो सकता है ऐसे like बीच में कुछ ऐसे interruption हो जाए so but that's
Still
fine.
recording.
Yeah, I'll cut it. That's fine. Okay, here we go.
कितना टाइम है?
30 minutes.
She's even conscious about eating chips. I can see.
I'm enjoying it live podcast and
Visual
we're recording and
Ah.
chips and salsa.
I feel like I could like talk to you for 2 hours on this, like maybe मेरे दिमाग में इतने questions हैं, we're down to 30 minutes. I have so many questions. But what we'll do is maybe we can like if you have time some other day we can bring more. Yeah.
No problem.
But I want to get back to this question.
मैं suggest करूँगा एक घंटे से कम क्योंकि लोग
हाँ.
मैंने जितने
So
लोग हो जाए
then it remains between three of us only.
मेरे पेरेंट्स को ही हो जाए थोड़ा छोटा कर थोड़ा
Okay,
सा।
okay.
एक घंटे से कम सही है।
ठीक है. I'm going to get back to that question जो मैं पूछ रहा था.
कौन सा?
The cross training. Let me just see क्या हुआ था.
Maybe you should talk about ortho versus medicine versus physio. I think that's where I have actually heard.
Okay.
They don't tire. Glutes don't tire. They have endless supply for energy and like endurance.
Okay. And do you have anything more
Endless
to say?
supply for energy. एक मिनट यार मेरा chain of thought टूट गया।
I know. हाँ.
एक मिनट क्या था? Question क्या था?
मैंने कहा था कि you were talking about why like running is more quad dominant and not like
It is not quad dominant.
as much. It's
पर
posterior.
इसका context क्या था? तो इस context में बोल रहे थे।
कि cross
Gluteus
training
medialis की बात कर
अच्छा,
रहे
I was taking
तो
deadlifts.
cross training क्यों करना important है?
Deadlifts.
तुमने बोला deadlift
हाँ,
बहुत
deadlift,
important है.
deadlift तक। Okay. Okay.
Ready?
So yeah, so as I said, the running, especially long distance running, is more glute dominant and should be more glute dominant and hamstring dominant activity, and not so much quad dominant activity. Because when you're doing more quad dominant, then you're overstriding, and overstriding leads to injuries. A lot of injuries like shin splints and knee issues and all of that stuff. So when you're doing a deadlift, it's mostly you're strengthening your posterior chain, which is your hamstrings, your calf, and your glutes, and your lower back muscles, and a little bit of also lats. Lats also play a huge role in keeping your posture upright when you're working out.
So you brought an interesting topic. I was when I was doing my masters in exercise science, our head of strength and conditioning at the school that I was in was actually an Olympian. He was a 100-meter Olympian from Jamaica, and now he was the head strength and conditioning coach for the school, training all the student athletes. And one thing I would see him, like he wasn't training track and field, but everybody who had some amount of running involved, he would spend so long on just focusing on arm movements, upper body arm movements. He's like, yeah, that's good, your legs are good, but he would just talk about how your arms should be swinging and accessory motions there. And like I was like, I didn't understand it back then. Like, do you guys care to elaborate? Like, why is that?
Totally aligned and agree. Again, you take me back to my coach. I should talk about him actually. Run with Ash. Ashok Nath is the coach who's in Bangalore. One of the best that I've known of. One of the first sessions, he teaches you about the lean. He talks about the alignment between the head, shoulder, hip, and the ankles. And then he talks about the 90-degree elbow bend and the free movement and everything moving in a forward direction, minimal lateral movement. All of that, is even before you go about, running. In fact, the concept has been beautifully explained by actually a running practitioner called Danny Dreyer in a concept called chi running. Yeah, and this chi running is about, so chi is the energy, and how do you harness your inner chi, into running. And it's a beautiful concept, and everybody should read about it if they're interested in running. And I think you one more point to add. We cannot run, frankly, if it's not coupled with all the cross training and the stuff that you put along with it. I was quickly making a mental note. We can't start a run unless we warm up, loosen, and roll the first part of relevant part, your entire body actually. It's not only calves and glutes and hands, we even do your upper back and then post run, stretching, and
Not pre-run.
no. So that's a distinction that we've been taught. Don't stretch cold muscles.
That's amazing.
Yeah?
That's good stuff.
Loosen and warm up. So it's about loosening and warm up. So you used to do hip circles, ankle circles, but you're not aggressively stretching the back of your calf or your quad before the run.
More like dynamic stretches, right?
These are more
Yeah,
dynamic
so
stretches.
he used to, the term that I've been familiarized with is loosening, warming up and loosening the body.
Okay.
You raise your knee, take it to the side, but you're not aggressively stretching yourself. Stretching you do for 15-20 minutes after the run. So you stretch, so in fact you shorten everything at the back, right? You shorten your calf, you shorten your ham, that you start stretching after the run. And the next day is all about, and then there has to be an element of strengthening, which is then weights,
Interesting.
weights and non-running muscles exercises in the week. So unless you put all of this together, we just don't get anywhere with our runs. We get into the cycle of injury and the recovery and injury and recovery, So, but this discipline is something that we have been completely brought onto, and our success is a function of how well you adhere to this.
Yeah.
It's no rocket science.
Gaurav, that just sounds like good training principles, right?
It is. Dynamic stretches I think it's one of the latest trends. Athletes
And backed by science. right?
and backed by science,
Yeah.
like new research, new articles.
Yeah.
Athletes no longer do longer stretches. Of course, unless you have like really tight muscles, you do the long duration stretches of 1 or 2 minutes. But that's not before when you go for your training or runs. You do dynamic stretches, more ballistic stretches, and then you go out for a run and then come back and do more stretches. And going back to the chi running and then the arm swing and all that aspect of the running, I think to add to what Manav said, what I would say is we have to look at the body in a very holistic picture. We cannot just isolate one muscle and say this needs to be stronger than the other. So when you're talking about doing a deadlift and strengthening the posterior chain, you're talking about glutes, your lower back muscles, talking about hamstrings, core, everything. Everything is involved. Everything is, they have to work in a very coordinated, manner, one force, just transferring from one muscle to the other, and then it's a very coordinated action. So you cannot just say that, okay, if your glutes are not strong, then your one side of your posterior chain is like really will be struggling,
Right.
and then you would invariably have knee injuries or ankle injuries or let's say shin splints or like tears in your in the Achilles muscles. So as Manav mentioned that he was having some issues in his external rotators of the hip,
Okay.
and that's why he was having shin splints.
Oh,
So you can correlate. Now once he started strengthening his core muscles and then hip muscles, he's back to normal, almost normal now. Not
Much better.
much better, right? So it's always like
That's
slow improvement.
That's actually really interesting, and it reminded me of something that I'd heard. I don't know if you guys have heard of this, but I heard this on some podcast where they were talking about top level athletes and some athletes coming from Russia, and they said this, which I found to be really interesting, made sense, but I never thought of it myself. He said for a lot of runners, and I don't think it was distance runners, or maybe it could have been, but they say, well, the thing is, you want to be strong, right? It's not like 20 years ago where you thought like, if you want to just run. You know, you train other things too. So one of the things was they were talking about deadlifts, and what they said was, what's interesting about the deadlift is as you pick those weights up from the floor and you almost like, you know, push through and lift up, which is, as we know in like our sciencey jargon, like it's called as the concentric portion of the deadlift, where you're trying to, you know, bend. And what they would do is, as they lift up the weights, they wouldn't actually go down, so they wouldn't really stretch the muscles against gravity, so they're actually eliminating the eccentric part of it. And the reason for that is because, as we know, eccentric causes the maximum muscle tension and in the longer term maximum hypertrophy, and sometimes you don't want your runners to have that extra weight, but you still want them to be strong. So what they would do is they would only go for the upward part of the deadlift and they would drop the weight, and then do the deadlift again, then just drop the weight. So like, you don't want these, if they're at the right body weight, you don't want them to be adding any more muscle mass. So just, you know, just neglect the part of, not neglect, but just maybe like, you know, don't consider too much of the eccentric but more on the concentric. And this was like a boom.
Yeah, simply don't lift as much weight. This
Yeah.
lift is, as you know, what is recommended.
Right, yeah, really interesting. But so that brings us to this topic that we're talking about shin splints, right? So with your long running and you know, your long running history and all the marathons that you've taken part in, like, what about injuries? I'm sure, like, have you encountered some along the way?
Oh yeah. So, I mean, there's a joke that we have in friends that, you know, runners are aching all the time.
Okay.
You know, and our family say, what the hell, you know, you get up in the morning, by the time we wake up, you're aching, yeah, and you're good for nothing on a Sunday. So Sunday normally 30 Ks, and you're so tired, and you don't want to go out with the family, and family says, you know, what is the fun in all of this? Then we tell them, well, I would any day choose a broken knee or a shin splint rather than a heart attack 30 days later,
Right.
you know. But that's a joke. But
Does it
yes.
work with the family?
Don't know. As I said, runners don't bother. There's a term, you know, it's called runners' wives. You know, like football wives. You know, they have an old band and they have their own sessions where they can bash up their husband's joint. You know, but that's okay. You know, we kind of learn to live with it.
What if the wife is also a runner?
Then, well, it's supposed to be very interesting. Not that I've seen too many.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I know a couple. This is on a joke like this side. I know a couple who used to run together in Gurgaon, and they should end up fighting about breakfast. Fighting on about who will make breakfast at the end of the run. The run is getting to an end. You have to go home. Who will make breakfast?
So you have that runner's high, but at the same time, you're like,
I don't think it's a great combination, to be honest.
that's interesting. But like, so yeah, what kind of injuries have you experienced in the past?
So I think it's very real. You know, I think all athletic people who are trying to push the envelope, and you're always trying to push your body to do more and more, it's living on the edge. So, and it's natural for you to fall off on the injury side. You just have to kind of know your body really well to get the symptoms. And in fact, what we've been taught is something called associative running. You know, where running on music is supposed to be an absolute no. You know,
I've heard that actually.
yeah, it's associative running. So, I mean, we've been trained by our mentors and our coaches that listen, it's not that you just get injured. It's just that you have not paid attention to the signals that the body was giving you, and that's how I get injured. And I completely believe it. When I got injured, I know that I have misbehaved with my body.
Okay.
So shin splints is my Achilles heel. You know, I have once in 2 years or once in 3 years I'll have a bad session. You know, I remember Cumberland was one of those areas. I had begun to feel it in the week before the race. There was no way in hell I was going to let it push me down, because 1 week to the race, I raced through Cumberland, had a phenomenal race, and I couldn't run for 2 months after that.
Oh, wow.
It was very bad. So yes, and the way and because I've been injured, I've actually developed my own understanding of who is the best guy to handle running injuries, and I don't think doctors do a great job. You know, the first thing, and some of my best friends are very well-known doctors, orthopedicians,
Okay.
and they just put you down. They'll just legs up, man, no running.
Oh
Stop.
yeah, yeah.
Stop, put your legs up. You hang up your boots, 3 months, no running, no race, nothing. Well, maybe they're right, but it doesn't seem to be the best way forward. I think physios, in my experience with several of them that I have worked with, you know, I think they have a softer understanding of this, of the soft tissues, you know, and this is pun intended, you know, it just came out like that, you know, but they do have a finer understanding of what goes in. You know, the entire element of knots and trigger points and needling. I have not heard doctors talk about this.
Yeah.
They're not spoken about. It is always on the physio side that you hear all this, and it works. I am a die-hard fan of needling,
Okay.
to the extent that it makes you lazy, you know, to the extent that you will prefer to get needled rather than doing rolling, and you become a little bit indisciplined. You have to prevent yourself from doing that. But I believe that a sound physio is a lifesaver, you know, when you're onto an aggressive training plan and onto races.
I think more
Gaurav
and
is there for me?
yeah, that's amazing. And I think like more and more people need to hear this message too, right? Like because we've had these doctors, advisors, especially like things are changing now for sure. But remember the time when doctors would say like you had back pain, bed rest for 10 days. That was the advice. Like just go on your bed, don't do anything. Right?
Yeah, I personally feel that having worked with so many doctors closely here in North America, in States, in Canada, that's no longer the case. Doctors do no longer prescribe total bed rest anymore. Even with concussion patients, you will see they'll say, okay, just rest for maybe a week and then start doing something afterwards. So it's an old school strategy.
I've seen a few. I was so shocked to hear it.
That's obsolete now. Yeah.
Yeah, I was shocked to see that. I did see this recently. I can't remember when. Maybe I was in India, back home in India, and I finally saw a script which said bed rest for 10 days for back pain. Like what? that's something I haven't seen. And what about the other common thing which people say like, oh, squats are bad for your knees, so don't squat or don't climb stairs because that's going to ruin your knees. You know, those blanket statements that you hear all the time is like, don't do this or don't do that. So it seems like you've been hearing a little bit of that.
One of the funniest and the dumbest advice that I've received from somebody was, oh, you are 30 plus, so you should stop running.
Well, you know, if you look
Kids
at
wanna
running,
run with you
Bad
too.
for your knees.
running is a mature sport. Where do you see kids doing long distance running?
Yeah.
You know, it's a mature sport. I wouldn't know of anybody who's done long distance running under 30.
Yeah, good point. I never thought of that. But
It's a mature sport.
Do you
It's a
think
clearly
maybe-
mature sport.
Do you think it's maybe something to do with the what's the word for that? I know it's what it's called midlife crisis.
I wouldn't say
You
midlife
would
crisis,
say-
but it's definitely something to do. But I don't know about midlife crisis, but this is something runners.
You're losing the momentum.
Runners talk
and
about
then-
no.
and then-
Runners talk about issues at home when they're running.
you're losing the passion in life and you want
That's not correct, Gaurav. Runners are
reignite that passion in the game
Oh,
in your life.
completely disagree with you. Runners are, I would say, the most energetic and tongue-in-cheek virile guys that you find
That's
around.
true, that's true, but that's after your mid-30s.
But I think like prior to 30s, when you're in your 20s, I think nobody's really, unless you're an athlete, you're not thinking about like putting that effort. It's all about like hitting the bar, how many drinks can you drown, you know,
Yeah.
like and you know how many. I think it's more of that. But you're right, like you don't see a lot of young marathoners for sure.
Some of them they are, but mostly most of them are like once they cross 30, they become more mature and more focused into what they want.
My view is very simple.
Yeah,
When
it's-
you're embarrassed of getting your pictures taken by the end of the 28th and the 29th year, and you're hanging over from all kinds of places,
Yeah.
That's when you want to move. And frankly, obviously when you start moving, jogging, even walking with discipline,
Yeah.
you start looking better. For some of them, it sticks and they graduate to running. That's the maximum number of entry into running that I have seen so far.
For me personally, I feel that it has more to do with people once they're cross 30, they don't feel you don't feel the peer pressure anymore. You're more independent in your thinking, and then you do your own things. Whether it could be anything, it could be when you're running or something else.
And trust me, Facebook and social media does a lot for running.
I mean,
Actually.
yes, it does, but you just do what you want to do. That's it. I don't think people like fall for peer pressure after 30.
I think like one of the reasons.
I never fell for it. I mean, to be very honest.
Yeah, yeah. But you were into it before too,
Yeah,
right? So,
yeah.
but I think
Yeah, you're the
that's-
purest. You're the pure blood types. You know,
Yes.
you're the destined
I'm
ones.
the destined one.
knew exactly what to do from right the beginning. Right?
Yeah.
But that's interesting because one of the reasons why I think it's so refreshing to hear something from like what you guys are saying, and especially you, Manav, is you bring a different perspective to this podcast. I know for the most part there are physios who are listening to this, and we try to get technical about, oh, why should you run? Oh, you need to your cardiovascular health and this and that, and maybe you need to train your core. But you brought a very factual but simple perspective. If you don't like how you look, right? Like it's as simple as that, right? You don't have to overcomplicate that.
That's true. That's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, that's
You start looking at your pictures with a lot of unhappiness. Like when I was married, I used to look so handsome, and now apparently I'm twice that size.
Right. Yeah. Simple but true, right? What about like anything else? Like just shin splints? Has anything else ever bothered you?
In my case, no. In my case, it's usually been shin splints. But I know, I mean, the usual people develop plantar fasciitis very, very frequently. I know a friend of mine who's continuously playing with. It's a very bad injury. Actually, it doesn't go away. It can. I mean, this guy that I'm talking about is a mountain runner, and he runs in Nepal and the Annapurna circuit, which is a very aggressive high peak in Pokhara.
Right.
And his name is Manish. We call him the monk because he runs the mountains, and he runs all alone. Yeah, we call him the monk.
But
And he's the one who typically he's been complaining with plantar fasciitis and ankle injuries. They don't go away, and then knee pains. People get into. But all of this we have seen it comes down to form.
I see.
Yeah, it comes down to bad form.
Now, when
And
you go,
imbalances.
now you've had your tryst with like a lot of physios before. Like, have you had bad physio experiences?
Oh yes.
Okay,
You know?
you need to hear that.
Yeah. So I would say I think bad physio in the sense that at least they won't cause damage, but the entire effort is wasted, and time is very critical to us, especially when you're in the middle of training season. Our plans are to the T. We have 17-week plans in which you have a base phase, a foundation phase, a base phase, a strengthening phase, a power phase, and then we're tapering, and then you're racing. So there's no time for wasting in between if there's an injury that comes up. So I remember going to physios, and I think there's a difference in the way physios are in North America vis-a-vis India. You have to be very careful when you're in India as to whom you're going in for a physio. I wonder if you guys have experienced the influx of rural Rajasthan massage guys,
No.
which can come and give you body massages for 500 rupees every week in Gurgaon, and I've been experiencing those guys.
Oh, really?
And they fit the bill. They know nothing about running, they know nothing about body. They have some local Peer Baba technologies and knowledge, which I don't want to discredit, to be honest.
Yeah.
But
That's not
they're
physiotherapy.
very happy to jump and squat on your back and fold you into 10 different shapes and give you a proper physio session. So from there to somebody more educated and more trained, who you have to make your choices wisely.
But what about
We're talking
Baba's?
about physiotherapists and not coach.
But all of them work in the same space, right? So as I said, you're a community of physios. I am a community of runners, and we are exposed to all kinds of guys.
So you're painting us, all of us, with the one.
Same
brush.
From a runner's perspective,
Okay.
we are offered all kinds of help.
So
No, but
Sorry.
I want to say, like, what about the fact that you find chiropractic college is anywhere between a 3 to a 4 year course in North America, and it's
Where is it in India?
Yeah, exactly. It's in the barber shops. You learn
There
it.
you go. So that's what I'm saying. So your perspective on physio is North American. In India, physiotherapy happens in the corner shop.
Yeah.
It starts with the knife. You're absolutely right. He gives you a chunky.
And then what about like when they so a chiropractic college, which is a 4 year course, can actually, like, if you're sitting in, like, this happens a lot, like cervical adjustments, when we do it, we all know cervical manips, you got to go through all your special tests, all your transverse LR test and ligament test and VTI and all that.
Neck
You think-
cracking.
yeah,
what
yeah.
you're talking about.
Exactly.
Every barber in India gives a tuck. Tuck.
You think if you ever go for a haircut in India, you think they're checking your transverse ligament integrity?
I have never taken that crack. I know he'll kill me.
Yeah, seems to happen.
One thing that I've heard from my barber, and he tells me all the time is, so I asked him, where were you last weekend? He said he had gone to Mumbai to give Shah Rukh Khan a cut. That's what my barber used to tell me.
He might be. That's funny. Like a lot of times you go in and they're working on your hair, and it's interesting how they're working on your hair. They're like, yeah, I feel some tension in your neck. Let me just fix that as well.
Yeah.
Wow, interesting. But tell us a little bit about what your bad physio experience looked like, because I think a lot of people need to hear this. What would that look like? What weren't you happy about?
So I think what irks you is you actually go to a proper physio and you explain what the problem is. We are very specific about what is bugging us. So I can, as a runner, I can actually pinpoint where I'm facing a pain. Is it a bony area? Is it a soft tissue area? And when do I feel it? Is it when I'm running? Is it in the initial part or the later part, and so on and so forth. So we try to be as explicit as we can. I think if it is not diagnosed properly or the problem is not understood and you end up going through a series of treatments, so we understand that physio is an iterative process. If a correction is needed, it will take 3 to 4 sittings. That's fine, But if the sittings are on a technique or an intervention that is not solving the problem, and after 2 months you're in the same spot, then it is frustrating. And that is what I see happens quite often. I'll give you an example. In fact, I will look for an education here today. You have this machine, this ultrasound machine, that gives small electric impulses into muscles, and they put these pads onto your lower shin and your calf, and they leave you for half an hour. And for half an hour, I'm getting small electric shocks. The damn thing does nothing, and I pay $2,000 for it. And 4 sessions I buy, and after 10,000 rupees or whatever, it's $500. Is that it? No, maybe not. Yeah. And at the end, I waste money, I waste time, and I don't get corrected, and I am getting electric shocks. What the hell? This is not my understanding of right treatment.
Yeah, I got it. So yeah, I understand that a lot of times physiotherapists do that, and it's.
But what is that machine? The electric shock.
It's just unfortunate. I don't wanna
Do you also do that?
Open
Do you also do that in your clinic?
Open a can.
No, I think Gaurav, I think
Yeah.
you should
I should.
open that, yeah.
Open
Because
can.
I've been on this kind of crusade a little bit,
Yeah.
because I think you're a really informed patient. Like a lot of times,
Yeah.
the biggest thing I don't understand with some patients is, you'll see some patients who are coming in for 2 months, right, and they've not gotten better, but they're not questioning the process. Like you questioning the process, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But they don't, and that's
Some
exactly
people
what they're
don't, some
getting.
people don't, yeah. I think it's with every profession. Again, if you're a doctor, if you're a physiotherapist, if you're a pharmacist, or any other profession, if you are not motivated, it all depends on individuals. It's a human quality. If you are a person who's a problem solver, you're motivated, you are willing to go that extra mile, then you will get the results. It's as simple that it's a human problem. It's not a one person problem or one person doing this. So you may have experiences where you don't feel that your treatment has not been modified as per your condition, and then somebody it's a very human thing.
For sure, people are physios are different, but the one thing, the general advice that I give my friends and family who are not seeing me or seeing a distant physio, and if they are active, is I say, if you go to a physio and you're an active person and your injuries come from activities like running, exercising, working out, and your treatments are passive, right, which means you just lie on a bed and that's all your treatment, you probably want to question that a little bit. So that's what I would say. A general simple rule of thumb is, if you're a runner and you just get those electrical machines set on you and you're not getting advice on so many different kinds of, say, running form. Here's another thing, not all physios run, so sometimes maybe your running coach would be a better person to advise you, but if you have a physio who could give you that advice, that's even better, right? But running form, I think the big thing that me and Gaurav spoke last time was training volume and intensity. That's something that we've been playing around a lot with now and understanding more. And I don't know if you guys have like delved into a little bit of bone stress fractures.
Yeah.
Yes.
Bone stress fractures is something which is now so common, which is misdiagnosed as plantar fasciitis, hip bursitis, and stuff like that. And bone stress fractures, like I could also like I have some information out there. Again, I'm not in the realm of a lot of running, but I'm definitely into the business of looking around everything. So I do have that knowledge. So I'll share some after that too. I'll probably send you a few things which I know about like bone stress management, but that could be something too. So if you find a physio who's just like sticking some like pads on you and doing those electrical stuff, yeah, I don't know if that's.
Does it really work? I mean, was it worth the while even then? I don't even know.
Yeah, to add to his point, passive, he said passive treatments and active treatments. So that's passive treatments. Passive treatment is not going to get you anywhere. Passive treatment may give you some pain relief for a few hours. That's it. That's all it does.
Mhm.
That's all it does. It's not
I
going.
remember getting shocks.
Yeah. So you may feel you may feel that this looks like a spectacular machine that's gonna
Exactly.
pull the pain away, but that's
It's a gimmick.
No, it's a gimmick. That's not true. That's not true.
I've actually changed my stance on those machines over the years. So my stance was from when I went to school to learning those things, then to applying them, then to getting really frustrated when nobody was getting better, to then going to this phase where I thought that like when I have my own place, I'm going to like grab a baseball or a cricket bat and break these machines, literally, and I'll only do hands-on. And now I've kind of become a little more neutral. I think that comes with a little bit of age and experiences. There are very limited time periods when somebody could probably require it. When somebody comes in with super acute conditions and you can't have them do much. And that doesn't last more than a few visits. So if somebody does it for the first 2 or 3, that's understandable sometimes. Like you don't need that, but once in a while that's understandable. But if it's going on for 2 months, yeah, then you want to like reconsider who you want to see or get advice from, for sure.
Two things that I use mostly is taping and needling.
Yeah.
And if I need those machines, then I'll use them. But I usually just stick
Yeah.
to taping and needling.
I think needling has been the most recent and the most effective method that I've experienced in my physio sessions.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, this is something that I was surprised to come across. And as I said, some of my best running buddies are established doctors in Delhi, and he's a running buddy. And I was surprised that the medical science doesn't recognize needling at all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I remember him telling me as a joke that, listen, I can't even imagine somebody sticking a 2-inch needle into my muscle. You guys, you were crazy. And I said that, listen, maybe I understand your academic reservation, but it works. I can feel it. I couldn't move yesterday and I was extremely sore the evening I was needled. I got ice pack at home. Next morning, I felt like I have fresh legs.
That's amazing. Yeah. Actually, that's not just in India. Like even when I was in New York, like when I was practicing there, in the state of New York, you couldn't dry needle because of like the battle that was turf war that was going on with acupuncturists at that time. Now you can, but yeah, a lot of people like in various states in the US you couldn't do it, and I think now you can. Well, gents, we're reaching the 1 hour mark. I feel like I could actually talk for 2 more hours to you. I still have so many questions, which may warranty another episode at some time. Like because I think we've scratched through the surface of a few things I want to talk about. We didn't even talk about like a lot of like how Manas started this. We just delved into this conversation, how he started like getting into like not injuries but running and like training and stuff like that, and even your other background, like I've seen your TED talk and stuff like that, and I learned a few things which I had no idea about. So yeah, Manas has had a TED talk on YouTube, and which city was this?
Oh, this was IRMA, the Institute of Rural Management in Anand in Gujarat.
Okay. Yeah. So it was a really interesting TED talk. Different. It's not a physio TED talk. If you guys are listening, thinking like Gaurav wasn't talking about that, but he spoke about certain things which I had no idea about, and he cleared some of my misinformation about rural India. So that's part of the podcast. Is I don't want to keep it too serious. There are other avenues to do that, right? You can follow me on different avenues to just talk about like exercises and like research and science. But the podcasting is more for, I feel like it's morphing now, especially now that Manav is here. Like it's more like, if you listen to it, get motivated, energized, or also keep it light, like you're driving somewhere and you listen to it, like it brings you some value. That's the idea behind it. And I think we are only scratching the surface, and hopefully if you have more time, I'd love to have you back on the show sometime. But before we sign off, any social media presence that you're looking for? You just want to stay away from this, or like is there some social media that in terms of like you want to?
Oh, so well, I would say that I have a certain amount of social media presence. I mean, in
Anything
all
you want to promote?
spheres. I mean, we were always there on LinkedIn. I have a Facebook profile, but I think my running space is the best expressed on Instagram.
On Instagram.
That's what I do.
And what's your handle?
Oh, so my home name is Manu.
Okay.
So it's the man who runs.
Oh, okay.
So it's D_M_man
Yeah.
_00 runs.
Awesome. Okay.
So-
And I'll add a link to that for people who want to follow it, because like I was saying in the last podcast, we need people like Manav and Gaurav to share stuff to get people motivated, right? So I'll add the link to that. And how about you, Gaurav? Do you remember your Instagram handle now?
Yeah, it's Gaurav158. That's my Instagram.
I remember your handle.
Okay.
So perfect. So those are the avenues you can reach Manav and Gaurav at. Hopefully we'll have another podcast. For the Thinking Physio podcast, I've recently uploaded some on Apple Podcasts. So I'm still kind of tweaking the last bit of it before I can set it up. But you can still listen to this podcast on SoundCloud and Spotify, and hopefully I'll be expanding that to a few more platforms in the future. Other handles where you can find physio-related content, which could be a little more into our field, would be just my YouTube, my Facebook, and my website. So my website is on WordPress. It's abhijitminhaspt.com. You can also find me on Facebook as Abhijit Minhas PT, and same handle on Instagram. So again, gentlemen, thanks for being on the show, and thanks for bringing that insight.
Total pleasure to be here. Thanks Abhijit and Gaurav for
Thank you,
hosting
Manav.
me. Really a complete pleasure. And thanks for the lady in the background who's setting up the tech.
My wife is making the video there. Awesome, Pooja's there. So again, guys, this is your host Abhijit Minhas signing off from the Thinking Physio podcast. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.